ComC.com is your home for buying, selling, and flipping all the hottest trading cards. Their consignment marketplace is home to over 24 million cards across all sports, genres, and eras. With a ComC.com account, you can purchase cards from different sellers over time and ship them home together later, or immediately reprice them for sale on the ComC marketplace. ComC is excited to welcome collectors to our booth in person at the 2021 National Sports Collectors Convention. It's taking place from July 28th to August 1st at the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center in Chicago. At this year's event, we'll be doing free live box breaks, live industry panels, autograph signings, and much more. Come visit ComC at booth 624. To stay updated with ComC and our events at the National, please follow us on social media at Check Out My Cards, one word, on all platforms. To learn more about the exciting changes being made at ComC, please visit blog.comc.com. You're listening to the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute, a podcast where we discuss both the hobby and business sides of collecting. I'm your host, Mike Summer, and I want to help you buy, sell, and trade your way into a collection you'll love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to National Week. Yes, this episode is coming out just the day before the 2021 National Sports Collectors Convention kicks off, and I am excited about spending the week up in Chicago at the show. I've received a few questions asking me what I'm going to be looking for, what my main focus is going to be at the show, and really, like I've said before, it's going to be getting a chance to meet with people, getting a chance to meet with other content creators and listeners and readers of the blog, and getting a chance to connect and build some friendships and build some relationships. That's what I'm looking for the most. I will be looking for a few cards, however. I'm going to be looking to finish off a couple sets. Probably the big cards that I'm looking for are two of the three Dr. J rookie cards from the 1972 Topps basketball set. So I'm going to be trying to track down those. There should be a couple of those I should be able to find. I'm going to be looking for some 1988 or 1989 Quaker Dips wrestling cards. I've got 4 cards from each of those years that I still need to get to complete those sets, and I love oddballs and food issue oddballs, so I'm going to be looking to see if anybody's got those. That might be a little bit more of a challenge. And then if anybody's got any 1980 Topps basketball single panels already separated, I still need 4 cards, 2 Dr. J cards from that, one of the Magic rookies and one of the Bird rookies. I'm going to be looking for some single panel 1980 Topps basketball cards as well, and see if I can't track down those remaining pieces for some of the PC sets that I've been working on. I'm also going to be spending some time with John Newman, who is our guest today on today's podcast. John and I have worked together over the years on Hobby Hotline when I was a part of that show. I've had a chance to be on his show a couple times, and now he is joining me for a conversation here on the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute. So I am going to let John talk a little bit more here, but I want to introduce him and kind of talk through. He's been in the hobby for like 30 years, and he started his show a few years ago, Sports Card Nation podcast. That was one of the ones that I started listening to when he got it launched, and he has seen some tremendous success of it getting off the ground and growing and adapting and changing, and I really appreciate that about John. He's a hard worker, he's consistent and regular, and I think you're going to enjoy hearing a little bit more about him in just a minute. This week, I'm also going to get to spend some time with the guys from Underdog Collectibles, the online shop run by collectors for collectors that breaks new product every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday night. Check out what they're going to be doing at udogcollect.com. But they're going to be at the National this week, and I'm going to get a chance to meet them. They're going to be spending some time away from their new shop that they opened in Knoxville, Tennessee, located near the University of Tennessee campus. Check them out at udogcollect.com, their Facebook group, and their new physical store. And wherever you find them, make sure you tell them that WaxPackHero sent you. John, welcome to the show. You have been a podcaster for several years. You've been involved in the hobby for several years. You do Sports Card Nation. You do Hobby Quick Hits. You're involved in several other productions. Welcome to the show. It's good to have another content creator to chat with.
Thanks. I think what you really were saying there is you're an old guy and you've been around a long time.
I don't know about that. You definitely have a lot of knowledge to share. I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about you is you approach content creation from the perspective of helping educate. And that's kind of the mindset that I've got as well. So yeah, I like the way that you're approaching things.
And you know this too, Mike, educating ourselves in the process as well.
Oh yeah, there's never a shortage of things to learn when it comes to the hobby.
Yeah.
Like I said before, you've been involved in the hobby for years. And I was curious, what led you to want to start a podcast a few years ago?
Well, you know Eric Norton. I've become good friends with him. You've become good friends with him. For me and my son used to just binge listen to that as we traveled to New York City, where I'm from Syracuse, and you know, my son said, knowing my background and having a store and being big into cards, my son said to me, "Hey, Dad, you ever think about doing a show like this?" And I kind of just said, "I don't know, I don't know if I could do it, Um, and so I never really, the thought was there, but I really enjoyed Eric's show. It's like, I'm not going to be able to do better than that. Why even, I'm not saying it's the right train of thought, but that was what I was thinking. And then I had a friend of mine who worked for ESPN on the radio, Dan Tortori. He was working in Florida. He's a person of faith, like we both are, I can say. And would, kind of be on a show and say, God, when he wrap it up, God bless you, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow type of deal. And they started sort of telling him, don't do that. Here is what your opinion is on this. And he's like, that isn't my opinion on this. Well, if you're going to be on the air, it is. And they were sort of scripting his beliefs and or trying to. And he said, what was a job he would enjoy driving to work to get in the booth and do became very tedious, intense. And he said, I'm not enjoying it. I'm stressing out. This is like, I dread going to the studio now when it used to be such a thing of love. And so they make the story a lot shorter. He came back to Syracuse and he started his own broadcast company. And he knew I was in the car. And he's like, hey, he was doing a daily show in the morning. He's like, hey, I had Fridays off from my 9 to 5 job at the time. And he's like, John, why don't we'll do it just a one-time show. Come on, bring like 8 to 10 cards that are sort of relevant to what's going on in the sports world, because he was doing sports. But he also collected cards a little bit. He's like, let's sort of tie them two together on a Friday for one Friday. And it's a video and audio show that he does. And so I did that, and he got like a ton of feedback. People were commenting, sending emails. Is this going to be, I collect cards too, or I used to, I'm kind of thinking about getting back. Is this going to be like an every Friday segment, which it wasn't supposed to be? And he called me up. He goes, you have every Friday off, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you want to do this every Friday? And I'm like, as long as it's not, doesn't screw up anything here, an appointment, as long as I'm free, I'll be there, because I'd have to go to his house. He had a studio downstairs. And so we did it. But I also knew my schedule might be changing where I wouldn't have Fridays completely off anymore. And I kind of gave him the heads up, like this might be coming down the pike. And so he goes, oh, that's all right. We'll do it as long as we can. So we wound up doing like 15 weeks of that. And then my schedule did change. I couldn't do it. My son actually did probably 4 to 6 in my place. Mostly sports. My son's really knowledgeable when it comes to sports. And that was sort of as I've said before, that was sort of like, hey, I can do it. Not only did I do an audio, I was on screen. I'm not a handsome guy by any stretch of the imagination, but I at least got over that fear, if you will. I got over that ledge. I took the plunge. And then that was when I said, hey, with what I want to do, it's not going to be necessarily live. I can kind of do it and release it when I want. So that's how really Sports Card Nation got born. Long story, sorry.
No, you're good. So the Sports Card Nation's kind of your anchor show, but since then you've added, I'm going to call them some spin-off shows, right? You did Hobby Quick Hits. You've announced that you've got another spinoff show that's going to be coming in August. I was wondering, what was the thought process that went into these spinoff shows? How did you go about deciding whether you would just add it as an additional episode of Sports Card Nation or create that actual standalone show?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll speak to Hobby Quick Hits first, Mike. You know, Sports Card Nation, I don't limit like gas and that sort of things. You know me, I can elaborate sometimes to a flaw. And so those shows, as you know, I've had 2 hour episodes. I think one was 2 hours, 20 minutes. They generally average between an hour and 15, an hour 30 overall. That's can be long in some podcast worlds. And so, someone asked me, man, like I love that. I love the guest list that you have. And I got some feedback like, hey, do you ever think of just doing a show where you tackle like one topic and just do like 20 minutes? I got a few of those. I didn't really act on it. And then I got a few more, and I'm like, there's some call. I could listen. I could try it. If it don't work and people don't listen to it, if the numbers reflect that, I can make it go away just as quick as I make it happen. And so that's kind of how that came about. And it did well. And at first, if you remember, I actually had it on a separate, like you'd have to subscribe to it separately. And then I thought, why am I doing that? It's all under the same umbrella. Why don't I just move it over? I think at one point it was on like Wednesdays, and I'm like, why don't I do that front of the week and then keep Sports Card Nation on the Friday it already was. So Monday, Friday, bookend it, short on Monday, ease them in, less of me on Monday, a little bit more of me on Friday. And switching it over, I probably should have did it sooner, truth be told, was the best decision I ever did, as numbers indicate that. And then, with the new show, which is August, it's called Breaking Cardboard. Then the same thing there. It hasn't aired yet, but people are like, hey, I appreciate your content, but do you ever think of doing a live show? And there's plenty of those. Sometimes I think like it's the same reason I didn't do it, because I was thinking of fat packs where like it's already being done. Like, so the new show is going to be once a month. It's going to be the second Friday of each month. It's going to be, and what I wanted to do with that, again, we haven't aired one yet, is I also want to have a co-host, and I'll say this on the air. I'd love to have you either on in that fashion or as the guest. So my idea with it is to have sort of two hosts and a guest. And once a month, like I said, second Friday, 9:30 at nighttime, and see how it goes. If it doesn't play off well, then you can always say, thanks. Hey, the 10 people that watch, thank you. And we'll see you on Fridays on Sports Card Nation and Mondays on Hobby Quick Hits. So it just, some people say like, why don't you do a live show? I kind of want to see that element. And it's not unknown territory, as you said, with Hobby Hotline and even doing that show with my friend Dan there on Fridays in his studio. I just say, hey, I'll give it a shot. But I also wanted to like throw a couple wrinkles in it and sort of have a co-host and a guest. I don't want it to just be me. I've always said, even with Sports Card Nation, like less of me and more of the guest is really the recipe there.
I think you hit on something that I think a lot of people don't think about, and that is when we're doing these shows, when we're creating content, there's sometimes a mindset of, hey, I've done this, I've started it, and now I've got to just keep on plowing through. But I like that you said, I'm going to test it, I'm going to experiment with it, and I'm going to see if people like it or not. And if they do, great, I'll keep doing it. And if they don't, I'll stop doing it. And people don't always realize that we've got that opportunity, right? There's some of these types of shows, some of these, live feeds, some of the written content. There can be a time and a place and a window or a season where that makes a lot of sense. And then there's times where, that needs to scale back now. Or, I've talked in the past about doing multiple episodes a week, and I just do one now a week because that seems to fit better. It seems to still let me communicate what I want to communicate. And you being willing to experiment with some new things, I think is great.
Yeah, and I think it's, to try new things and learn. Like we talked about, even in just hobby terms, it works in the same fashion with content creation. Like, and just because one show, I think you know where I'm going. Just because one show might be really successful doesn't guarantee any future. The old doesn't guarantee future success. People might say, "Man, this dude's getting uglier every year. I don't want to see a video of this guy. I'll listen. I'll consume them in audio form. That's all right. I could swallow that. But man, I just that's where I draw the line. But you try to, and I know you get a lot of questions from people with now with maybe launching their own show. I still get them, and one of the two pieces of advice I give them, Mike, is number one, you don't know unless you try. You gotta like let your inhibitions go. Do it. If it don't work, or you're not comfortable, or you're not enjoying it, same thing. You don't have to do it, but at least you tried. And the other thing is, don't be too quick to throw in the towel either. It's sort of a balance, from where Sports Card Nation is today to when it started. I've said this many times on the show, probably ad nauseum. It's two different worlds. There could have been a couple times early in that process where I'm like, you know, it was a good run, or hey, I had fun, but let's wrap it up. And I obviously I didn't. And so that would be my advice to someone else, is like, as long as you're having fun with it and you're enjoying it, that's number one. And then everything else, whether it's downloads and sponsors and that stuff, comes later on in the process. But you got to have fun. Like someone asked me, I don't know if you ever, like, how would you know, like, not to do Sports Card Nation anymore? Like, when would you stop it? And the answer is two answers: when I'm not here anymore, hopefully that's later than sooner, and number two, when I go to do an episode or record segments and it's like almost like work. Like, man, I don't want to do this. And sure, there's moments, but when it becomes more the norm than not the norm, that's my cue to, like, I don't care how many downloads. Like, the one thing I won't do is go through the motions. I won't make a show just because this many people listen to, but I don't really enjoy it. I think that's sort of disingenuous, and I'm not gonna. People may not agree with everything I say, but I try to be honest and real about it. And so when I feel like I'm sort of like a showman, like I'm just going out there and doing performing for an hour and a half, and then turning the mic off and being glad that I did that, that's probably when it's time for me to hang up the mic, so to speak.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned Hobby Hotline, which was a live call-in show that you and I both were a part of for a while. And there's several other content creators that are a part of that show. That's just one of a handful of, I'm going to call them collaboration shows that you've been a part of over the years, and that you continue to be a part of. How do you compare your involvement in some of those kind of collaboration shows versus the shows that are more driven and owned by you? Is there any kind of give and take there for your thoughts about how you approach those, how you decide which of those you might want to get involved with or start fresh or whatever it might be? Kind of how do you approach some of those collaboration shows?
I love this questions. I love this question. I think for me, when you're in a show with 8, 10 other people, as Hobby Hotline is, you sort of, I know it's a cliche line, you got to check your ego at the door. And we all have them. Anyone that says, I don't have an ego, that's not being truthful either. So you gotta check that at the door. And, obviously, you got Brian Gray involved in that show sometimes, and Dr. Beckett, James Beckett's on there once a month. And, that's definitely will get you to check your ego, even if you weren't doing it willingly, very quick. When you see, and Dr. Jim, when you see someone to that hobby level, a hobby icon, just be a down to earth guy. I've gotten to know him very well. I know you have as well. I say to myself, like, this is a guy that's, if there's a Mount Rushmore of the hobby, he might be one of the first or second at worst case on that Mount Rushmore. And yet you would never know that by talking to him. When I first met him, I had a whole different perception of who he was, which perception's not always reality, as we both know. And so that makes it easy. Seeing someone carry themselves in that fashion makes it really, not that it would have been hard anyway, but it makes it easier. And I think for someone who may be having a difficult time in that aspect, you look at that as sort of an example of how to do it. And it's fun. And now we're an early in, not that it was bad, but we had a lot of the same people, myself included, on almost every week, and I'm on like once a month, and that's good. I think people don't always want it. There's so much, even with our regular shows. John, again, I think once a month is good, and getting different perspectives, different faces on the screen. I think it's played better. And again, I think everyone has done a great job there. I don't want to just speak to myself, but everyone has done a great job to sort of, work together and sort of leave those egos at the door, come in and let's just have fun, talk hobby, take, people who call in, answer their questions the best we can. And to see someone like Dr. Jim, going back to that, Brian Gray from Leaf, come on, they don't have to do that. They can say, hey man, I'm doing this. Sorry guys, put me on once every 6 months, right? Or whenever, I'll let you know, right? The fact that they're willing to do it makes it easier for the rest of us sort of to do that.
Over the last few years since you've been podcasting, you've done short shows, you've done long shows, you've done interview style shows, you've done single topic shows, you've done collaboration shows, pre-recorded, live. You've kind of spanned all different types of content creation when it comes to podcasting and video shows. What has surprised you the most about creating content at this point?
That's an easy one for me, and you might agree from doing this yourself, and I've said this before. It's the time. It's the time that when someone hears, like, Sports Card Nation comes out, let's say Friday, it's an hour and a half in length from, if you listen start to finish, but there's probably 4 to 6 hours of time put in that show, from editing, from the interview itself. Like how this goes. When you talk to someone, it's very rare you just do the interview and say, see you later, right? Bye. Thanks for coming on. You're out, right? Sometimes some people have like time, like I got an appointment, I got to go, but generally you have a conversation off the air. So while someone hears that hour and a half of content, could be anywhere from 3 to 6 hours of man or woman power going into that production. And so that's another thing, we talk about questions people ask us when they're thinking about taking the plunge. I don't want to lie, I'm like, you're a fan of the podcast, now you want to do it. That's awesome. Do it. I'm not trying to talk you out of it, but I also want you to know, while you're here in that whatever time that show's on, there's more time to produce it. You need to know that sort of going in. I don't want to, like, hey, why didn't you tell me about that? Like, it takes, I didn't want to. So I always very transparent with that.
Yeah. And even those live shows, right? There's time that you spend preparing so that you're going to have somewhat of a clue of what you want to talk about, or that you're going to be speaking knowledgeably about whatever topics are going to be discussed. So even those live shows that you're not necessarily having to do editing on, there's still work that goes into those.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely got a pre-show. What are our main topics? Who's on? When I got scheduling, when you have a rotation, as speaking just the Hobby Hotline, who's on this week? Oh, something came up, I can't make it. Someone fill in for me. So there's a lot that goes into it. I think some people realize, I don't want to paint everyone with a broad brush. And I think some people probably don't. They think, hey, it's an hour and a half and John spends an hour and a half, WaxPackHero's 30 minutes and Mike spends 30 minutes and that's it. And it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? We know, and other people, but I always make sure if someone asks me, I don't say it to pat ourselves on the back, But if someone asked me, I definitely want them to realize, like, you're gonna have to put some elbow grease into it too.
You had mentioned that you get questions from time to time about starting a show or creating content. And I know I picked your brain before starting this show and got some insight and things that you had learned and things that I should be thinking about. And I get the same type of questions from time to time. We've seen this massive proliferation of hobby content over the last couple of years. What's your perspective on, do you think that it's all valuable?
Oh man, I guess to some, the beauty, it's the old. I know it's cliche. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I don't listen like you. I can't say I listen to every one. I like certain shows. Your show is in that column. I may not listen to another one. Um, I believe in analytics in the hobby, but I don't necessarily like shows that just speak analytics. I like the organic grassroots. I kind of, I think we're products of our environment, so to speak. So coming up in the hobby, we didn't have all the charts and graphs that we have now. I think they're great. I'm not uh, I use Card Ladder to give them a little plug there, but I too much of that I don't like. So if the show's going to be all bullet points and wall like a stock market show, I tend to not. It's not probably going to be on my regular rotation. I may listen from time to time. I don't want to totally, but it's probably not going to be in the regular rotation. I like interview shows. I like when you talk to somebody that I know or don't know. And then if it's someone I don't know, I get to know them through your conversation with them. Again, plug of the hobbies, the people is the tagline of Sports Car Nation. I didn't come up with that because it sounded cute. I believe that wholeheartedly. And so the people, I tend to, so I guess where I'm going with this is I tend to lean towards interview shows, yours included, and others as well. And not that I don't listen to, a show where someone doesn't have an interview. I do too, but I really like that banter. I like hearing perspectives, even if it's maybe not agreeing. I've gotten to know people through having you interview them. It's nice, even people I know, hearing you interact with them to how I've interacted with that dynamic. So I'd say interview shows first. I tend to shy away from like over the top, analytical shows. There's nothing wrong with them. Probably a lot of, and in those folks' defense, there's probably a lot more research goes into that than maybe even something I do. So I'm not trying to be, I'm just kind of speaking to personal preference. And there's probably people who say, hey, I don't like hearing two guys or you talk to whoever. I rather hear, hey, where's the market going and what's next? And so to each to reach their own. And I always say, if a content creator is putting in the work, you got to at least give them that much credit, whether the show comes out good, bad, or in between. They're at least trying.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the market will speak, and there's going to be an audience. If there's an audience, then and they're finding value in it, great. I may not find value in all of it, but if somebody is, then it's filling a need, right? Now, you also have Newman Sports Cards, and you've owned a shop in the past. You've done shows, and you're involved in other avenues to sell cards. I was curious about what your current strategy or approach is related to buying and selling.
Man, it's just taking my experience for the 2 cents it may be worth, and just applying it as best we can. And I've even not taking my own advice. I've said, I just posted something the other day, be careful buying pitchers. And then I just bought 400 Corbin Burns rookies. And, sometimes, just go with your gut instinct sometimes too. Don't be so rigid where this person said this, John Newman said that, Mike Summers said this. It's gospel. Now we may be right, we might be wrong, but take that if you want to take that sort of perspective, but also put your own thought process into it. As far as I try to keep Newman Sports Cards, though, sort of separate from the content creation as much as I can. Obviously, I know you do it, and I appreciate that. Sometimes I will talk about some sales. Sometimes even on social medias, I post, hey, I sold this today. I think it's hard to completely not talk about transactions. I mean, I don't think we need to apologize for that. There is a faction of the hobby, Mike. I kind of curious your take too on this. There is a faction of the hobby that doesn't like. I don't know why. If you ask me why, I'm not sure. Maybe jealousy is probably the first thing. But there is a faction of the hobby that doesn't like seeing people talk about their sales or their numbers or their uh, I don't know why, as long as someone's being truthful. And how I think sometimes, uh, maybe not in our cases, but maybe other people could posture, hey, I did, 40,000 in sales this week. Or, you see someone post their like last 90 days at eBay sales. It's sort of a brag post, but who's to say that they just didn't get that off the internet and say it's there. So I try, that's one of the reasons I try not to talk a lot about my sales in depth, is because I don't want to be like, oh, you're just bragging, you made this or you made that, or you can say that. It's not true, John, So I try to sort of not talk about it, but I think to talk about the current landscape, where we are in the hobby, sometimes I think it's prudent to talk about, hey, this card I sold for $150 last year, I couldn't even get $20 for, or the reverse. Now this card that's 150 is now $20 and not a lot of call for it. So you have to talk about our transactions. I just try to do it at a level where it's not too much. And I don't want someone to like message me, and it really hasn't happened because I think I'm staying on top of it, but I don't want to get some feedback like, John, I don't care about all your transactions. Like, talk about, the guests or the hobby in general. And so I try to find that middle ground as best I can.
Yeah, you asked kind of what my thoughts were. I think it comes down to what you had said earlier, that you can't please everybody, right? There's some people looking for the quote unquote investment related content or an analytics related content. Others are looking more for the pure celebration of a card or a set or an athlete or something like that. And I think the same thing applies when you talk about kind of that blend, or how you blend in the potential business side of things. For me, the reason I'm comfortable with it is that's part of the ethos of the show that I'm trying to do is not everybody is a quote unquote pure collector. Not everybody is a pure businessman or businesswoman when it comes to the hobby. There's a lot of us who are a hybrid of that, right? We use the business side of the hobby to cover the cost of the collecting side of the hobby. And that's something that I wanted to do with this show from the beginning, is to show how I buy and sell to cover the cost of the cards that I want to keep for myself. And so that's why I feel comfortable in kind of talking about both aspects, because it's who I am and it's how I hobby. And,
Yeah.
And so I think that's the reasoning that I use. And that's met, there's an audience for that too. Right. And it's been so rewarding when I get feedback that said, hey, I never even considered doing X, right? But now that's letting me add this to my collection, or I'm able to cover my car payment now because of using some of those things that you've talked about. That's super rewarding to me. And that's reinforcement for me that there's an audience for that.
Well, you're sharing your experiences, and listen, I don't know what the percentage is. There's probably very few people that don't sell something. I mean, maybe some sell more than others or list more than others. I think even, I hear the term true collector. I mean, even probably the truest of collectors have sold the card at some point, whether it's their close buddy, hey, I want that card, I'll give you $10 for it, and it's the only sale they made that year, you sold the card. So I think there's a faction, Mike, that sort of looks negatively on people who sometimes sell. I don't know why, but like you said, you can't please everybody. I try to find that middle ground, but even when you talk about sales or how you're doing at different platforms with different things, including the show, you're sharing experiences. Now, you know what I mean? I don't think it comes across as, hey, I got all the answers. This is the template, this is just how I'm doing it. Maybe you can learn something. I'm sure there's people didn't even know sports law existed until they heard Mike Summer talk about it and that sort of thing. And so that's educational. That, hey, I didn't know. I've seen people say that until I heard Mike talk about sports law. I didn't know about it. And there's different ways. I think that I don't think you talk about it in a bragatory sort of way. Others may. That's their business, and to each their own, like we say. But I guess it's how it's done, and I think you do more into an enlightenment to enlighten someone, educational. I try not to do it too much because I do have some high end stuff, and if I said everything I did, it would just be like all that dude does is just this, and that's not. If you know me, that's not really who I am, and so I don't want that even though it's not reality. I don't even want the perception to not match the reality. So rather than go there, I try to kind of, not really highlight. If someone asked me privately, like, hey, what's the most expensive card you ever sold? You ever lose on a deal? Yes, and yes. I'm not really shy to talk about it. I just try not to make that the focal point, for me anyway.
Now, in your younger days, like I had mentioned before, you had been a shop owner, and now cards and content is not your full-time gig. Have you ever considered making cards your full-time gig again, or making a pivot to that at some point in the future?
Let me first answer to say I'd love to. I love the hobby. I love the cards. So if you told me that's all I had to do, I hope my job's not listening, but I'd probably put in my notice. I won't mention, yeah, but I would love to, Mike. But and you have a 9 to 5 job too. There is some comfort in knowing, like, as long as we do our jobs, we should have our jobs, and there's some perks along with regular jobs, from benefits and as a family guys, bonuses and different sort of packages that come along with different things that we won't get into specific. I'd love to. My son every once in a while, Mike, will ask me, "Hey, Dad," he wasn't around during my store days yet, but he knows about them. And, hey, would you ever want to do that again? I tell him I'd love to, but I don't know if I could. I'd be a little bit. I'm very honest. I'd be a little bit nervous about doing it full time because the pressure gets ramped up. Like, you have a bad day in the store. Like, I don't. You might have a bad day at work, but you still work 10 hours and you get whatever your hourly wage is. If you're, or even salary, you get your salary as long as you show up to work. You don't, it's not based on someone coming in or not coming into the store or not making sales. So that aspect. And, I always say, like, when my son asked me that question, how I answered is, here in Syracuse, and I love where I live. I'm not trying, but it's not a huge market, and it's tough. We have one store, and that gentleman owns the building, and so he doesn't have overhead. I'll leave it at that. I could elaborate. We'll leave it at that. But I always tell my son, Mike, we're only an hour from Cooperstown. So if I got to that point where I sort of wanted to go to that level again, I think one of the things I would look to do, and maybe someone hear this and jump on my idea. And there's card stores there. It's not like it's not been happening, right? But I'd probably go to Cooperstown, go into one of the real estate offices there, see what had a storefront, maybe a living quarter. There's a lot of, if you've been there, there's a lot of storefronts with living space above too, is maybe buy someplace like that, open a store in a huge baseball tourist town, and then have that residence either to rent out as income to kind of pay for the storefront, or the other option I'd consider doing is I could live there. Or if my son wanted to run it when I'm not, I wouldn't have to be there. Maybe I show up on weekends, while I work during the week. And then if the business gets established and it's doing well, there's no guarantees, but if you get to that point, then I can maybe leave, pivot from my 9 to 5 to just go in there. And then the resident part of it becomes where I don't have to commute every day back and forth. I can spend a couple of days. My wife could, hey, we're going, come on the week. Just that's where my mind goes. That would be sort of my Field of Dreams card store edition, if you will. But you got to have the thought to make it happen. It doesn't happen without the premise. So.
Yeah, I've been asked that same question, and I think my answer is similar, right? It's one thing to do all of this as a side hustle and in addition to, or something in addition to our main 9 to 5 gig. It's a completely different thing if it is your sole source of income that you and your family are dependent on to live and survive and pay medical insurance and all of those other things that go along with it. I kind of view what I'm doing right now as a long educational process that's setting up a potential encore career once I retire from my main job, right? And so that's kind of the way that I approach it. It sounds like we're a little bit similar in that mindset.
Yeah, which means that when we both retire, we have to be partners in an LCS. It sounds like.
There you go. Hey, this is going to be coming out the day before the national starts. And so people are hearing this with the next day being the start of the national. What are your plans for the national this year?
I just did my national preview show. And one of the tips, that I do, it depends how long you go for. I'm going for the week. I believe you are too. That gives you a lot of leeway that you don't have to be rigid or as structured. So my plans are really going to do some on-site interviews. We have a couple of slots for the main stage, one with Hobby Hotline, one hopefully with Sports Card Nation. And like you say, just meet, Hobby is the people. Throw my tagline in there, but it really is, as you well know, just meeting people for in most cases for the first time. In some cases, the national is sort of like that get together, right? Coffee. Let's get together for coffee once a year, right? It's at the national. Insert drink of choice, if you know what I mean. So, but and some people you're going to meet for the first time. Some people you're looking forward to. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in person. We've met already, so it won't be the first time. I think there's that aspect to it, and so I'm looking forward to that. A couple on-site interviews. I bring a little digital recorder. They're not going to be full-fledged interviews. Just kind of, hey, how's the show going for you? What are your observations? What do you think so far? Coming off a year where we had it canceled, and I'll probably make a one show with probably 10 vignettes, if you will, of little conversation. Maybe even you'll be one of those potentially. So I'll try to do those obviously towards the back end of the week. To go there on a Wednesday, say, hey, what do you think of the show? Right? It just started, John. It's great.
Yep.
So that sort of thing, meeting some folks, doing some on-air stuff and buying some cards too. I don't bring any cards to sell. I'm just sort of a consumer. One of my recent PC thing, I've always said I don't PC enough. And so I decided I had a little bit of a head start with some of the inventory I already had. I'm going to do a graded Hall of Fame rookie collection. They're going to be cards that I purchased with no intent to resell, which is not something I did a lot of prior. To be honest with you, full transparency, I didn't do a lot of that, and I want to do a little bit more. And so that's the avenue that I'm not a set guy. I used to be. My house isn't that big, and my garage. My wife's always telling me the garage. Look through that stuff. Do you need all of it? So I knew it wasn't going to be like going back and doing sets. I love people who do that. I know you do that. It's awesome. It's not easy. It's accomplishment. Like you said, that feeling you get when you get that last card. I know you had that experience recently with a 68 tops. I love it. I'm not in that place to do it. So I said, well, what can I do? And I said, man, I'm going to, do the, not just baseball, but baseball centric Hall of Fame rookie graded cards.
Now, with you and I having kind of our fingers on the pulse of the hobby through the conversations that we have through our various shows and some of the collaborative shows that we're a part of, there's different thoughts, there's different perceptions, expectations that people have for this coming national. Is there anything when it comes to the National that you're going to be there in attendance looking to observe? Kind of I don't know the best way to say it, but is there anything that you're going to be trying to pick up on to get a feel for when it comes to the overall vibe at the National?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're both actually qualified as this now, as dealers and consumers of cards. I wear both those hats. We know where the market sort of, if, like you said, finger on the pulse, we know where the market is. I want to, as a fellow dealer, if I can say it like that, I want to see, I know sort of my approach if I was set up there. I'm not, but I know how my approach would be. I'm curious. And again, you got 1,500 tables. If we're set up next to each other, we may have different approaches, obviously. But I want to see the general consensus. I guess that's the best way to put it, is what the dealers are going to marketize their inventory. Are they going to put stuff out and sell it for kind of going rate? Are they still going to try to hold out for that top dollar and sort of say, hey, I got this into it. I know it's dropped, but I can't do that. I kind of want to see where the dealers go with where the market is. I think that's going to be an indication, maybe how long, I hate to say it like this, how long this lasts. Maybe a poor choice of words, but sort of, I think the more like sellers sort of embrace, here's where we are, and it can go back up just as potentially. I'm not saying it will. It could go back up, maybe not to the level it was. I think that was sort of an anomaly. So I'm going in the show just kind of walking the room as someone that wears both of those hats, and I want to see so kind of what I did in Dallas. I want to see, what I hear when someone hands them their case and says, you're interested in looking some stuff? I got some nice stuff. You want to buy it? And I heard a lot of in Dallas. I heard a lot of, not right now. Usually I would, but I'm looking just to sell at this time. Or I've even heard other dealers be honest that day and say it's not been a great show for me. Normally I would, but under circumstances right now I can't. So I want to get that vibe to see, are we still there? Our dealers are going to sort of, hey, this is where we're at, and I need to, sell some stuff, even though I might have to grin and swallow hard and see where they're at. And it's hard to tell. I mean, just walking the room on it's sort of a small litmus test, but you can kind of get a vibe to where we are.
Very cool. Well, thank you for spending some time today and getting together to chat a little bit. I can't wait to get to have a conversation face to face again here tomorrow, I guess, from when everybody else is going to be hearing this. But look forward to getting a chance to connect again at the National itself. Tell everybody where they can follow you and find your shows.
I'll make it easy and short and sweet. I don't always get short and sweet, but I'll make this part short and sweet. If you Google Sports Card Nation podcast, all our stuff comes up. Twitter, Instagram, podcast, all individual words, Sports Card Nation podcast, and there'd be no shortages of search results. So that's probably the best way to find us.
Well, thanks again, John. I appreciate the conversation.
Always, Mike. Appreciate it too.
The Sports Card Shop is your small-town local card shop with a global reach. Located in New Buffalo, Michigan, the shop is one of the most accessible in the Midwest. In addition to being an authorized Panini direct dealer, the Sports Card Shop carries all major trading card brands, including Topps, Upper Deck, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and more. With all that new wax, 500,000 singles, and showcases full of graded cards, you're sure to find something great for your collection, whether you're just starting out or a seasoned collector. The Sports Card Shop is your one-stop shop. So call us, come see us, or visit us on the web and social media. Our phone number is 269-469-0140. Website is thesportscardshop@moco.com. The Sports Card Shop is part of the MoCo Retail Group, connecting sports, the hobby, and people around the world.
Thanks again to John for coming on today. I really appreciate that conversation, and it was a long one. Well, if you are going to be at the National this week, be sure to stop by the ComC booth to have a conversation with me. I am going to be doing a live version of the show on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday evenings at 5 p.m. at the ComC booth. We're going to be having some interviews, some conversations, doing a recap of the show. I would love to meet you. That's one place that I will be, but I'll be around. Look for the guy in the WaxPackHero t-shirt. Well, that's all I have for you today. If you want to leave some feedback, reach out at waxpackhero@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter at @TheMikeSummer. And I would love to hear what you think about the show. Better yet, find me in person at the National this week and let me know what you think. That's all I've got for you today, so I'll catch you later.